Jonathan, over to you. You started to touch on some of the strategies Canada could deploy, and specifically thinking about how does Canada leverage multilateral avenues like the WTO or G7 or others? Help us understand that.
Well, I think Guy alluded to this. Frankly, there is a consensus not only that's crystallized in the United States, but throughout the West regarding the conditions of economic engagement with China. And I'd highlight two major dimensions of that. Number one is the role of the state in the economy, and to what extent is Chinese state control, ownership, direction of its corporate entities, such as to distort trade. Second is a technology competition and the misuse and abuse of technology and related intellectual property. On the other hand, as the world's most populous nation for now, until India catches up, and the world's second largest economy, and the extent to which in a number of non-sensitive fields we do have throughout the world some dependence and interdependence with China. The trick will be for all of us in the so-called West to figure out the terms on which we can collaborate in areas of mutual interest, be it in the economy, be it on climate and the global commons on the one hand, while preserving and protecting and being vigilant about essential security interests on the other. And doing that in allied fashion, of course, is preferable. I agree that based on the Trump administration performance on the one hand and Biden's campaign statements on the other, the approach and the tone may be different, but the objectives will remain the same and will be shared. And this is a dialogue not just between Canada and the United States, but with the EU, with Japan, and with other like-minded countries who share the concerns. Those are discussions that can take place and should openly at places like the WTO, but there are other fora, a little less public, such as the G7, the so-called Five Eyes, of a shared intelligence community among the closest allies, where behind the headlines of President Trump, that dialogue has been engaged with the United States and others and will continue as well. So all of which is to say, of course, Washington will be a focal point for engagement, but so too are these other fora that complement what we're able to talk about bilaterally as well.
So we've touched on a lot related to global affairs there, and I just want to share with you some Pew Center research related to U.S. global reputation, and because some would argue that's been on the ballot right for this election. So in 2020, only 35% of Canadians have a favorable view of the United States, compared to 70% in 2016. Perceptions of the U.S. have deteriorated among global peers. Now, as you pointed out, Biden has vowed to rebuild a more sort of rules-based world order and to be more conciliatory in approach. I'm interested in hearing from both of you in terms of, do you think that with a Biden win, the reputation and favorability of the U.S. will change significantly? And if you could also give us a sense for, with a Biden win, how the United States might change its relationship with authoritarian leaders. So a question about reputation and then approach to dealing with authoritarian leaders. Guy, let me start with you.
Okay, well, I think that Biden has his work cut out for him but he will want to work on these issues. In fact, he has a very broad and relevant international experience. And since he might be constrained in what he wants to do domestically by the Congress, in fact, he will have more of an open field on the in terms of international relations. And already he has indicated that he would want to, for instance, rejoin the Paris Accord. I think that he will want also to rejoin the World Health Organization. I wouldn't be surprised that the Americans come back to try to join the CPTPP, because this was one of the first actions that Trump did when after he was elected. And now I think they see the advantages of, and so I wouldn't be surprised by that. I think also there will be a lot more effort devoted to non-proliferation issues. The relationship with Russia on that front is not very good. There are risks that are building up. In fact, there should be also discussions with China, which has nuclear armaments. There's North Korea, of course, that is out there. And I think also that probably Biden would want to come back to Iran, to the agreement that had been negotiated, because in my view, this was a very good agreement. On WTO also, I would hope that the United States would stop stalling the appointment of judges to panels. Very shortly, there will be a decision that will be required on who should be the next Secretary General of WTO. Clearly, if Biden wants to work with allies, he knows that we need a well-functioning international trade system, and I would hope that WTO would be the focus.
Jonathan?
Well, your question was about authoritarians. Former Ambassador Gottlieb in Washington used to say there are no friends of countries, there are friends of interests. And what is the U.S. interest? And as Guy suggests, in almost every region, what has to be assessed properly is the U.S. interest in security and otherwise. So North Korea, President Trump's friendship with the North Korean leader did not produce results. Will that remain a bilateral channel or go back to six-party talks? Remains to be seen. China will, of course, be key in that regard. The Middle East, more broadly, the Middle East is a very complex area. So if Iran and Saudi Arabia are competing for primacy and influence, and it's Sunni versus Shiite, neither regime would be called a shining star of democracy at the moment, and one needs to choose allies. And despite whatever shortcomings one might identify in Trump's diplomacy, his influence over certain countries in the region, leading to some modicum of peaceful coexistence between some in the Arab world and Israel, is to his credit. So Biden will need to navigate throughout the region, and Turkey, of course, playing into Syria and beyond, and Azerbaijan and Armenia poses a challenge as well. So in each and every area, it's not, do I like this fellow or woman or their democratic principles alone, but there are some essential security interests that have to be factored in. Just as Canada and successive prime ministers would say here, our job is to get along with whoever is in office in Washington. So too, any president of the United States will have to deal with a range of foreign characters, regardless of their stripe.
Mm-hmm.